the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces, and the Defense and Production Brigades. The armed forces have long been the most powerful institution in Cuba. The military manages many enterprises in key economic sectors representing about 4% of the Cuban economy. The military has also served as former Cuban Communist Party First Secretary, as well as former President of Cuba, Raúl Castro's base. In numerous speeches, Raúl Castro emphasized the military's role as a people's partner. The Cuban Army in its original form was first established in 1895 by Cuban revolutionaries during the Cuban War of Independence. It maintained neutrality during World War I and was involved in the Battle of the Caribbean during World War II when it was part of the Allies supported by the United States. After the Cuban Revolution had overthrown Fulgencio Batista's government, the Cuban rebel army under Fidel Castro's leadership was reorganized into the current armed forces of Cuba. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union granted both military and financial aid to the Cubans. From 1966 until the late 1980s, Soviet government military assistance enabled Cuba to upgrade its military capabilities to number 1 in Latin America and Project Power Abroad. The first Cuban military mission in Africa was established in Ghana in 1961. Cuba's military forces appeared in Algeria in 1963, when a military medical brigade came over from Havana to support the government. Since the 1960s, Cuba sent military forces to African and Arab countries, Syria in 1973, Ethiopia in 1978, the Cuban intervention in Angola from 1975 to 1989, and Nicaragua and El Salvador during the 1980s. The tonnage of Soviet military deliveries to Cuba throughout most of the 1980s exceeded deliveries in any year since the military buildup during the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1989, the government instituted a cleanup of the armed forces in the Ministry of Interior, convicting Army Major General and hero of the Republic of Cuba Arnaldo Ochoa, Ministry of Interior Colonel Antonio de la Guardia, and large numbers of army officers were moved into the Ministry of Interior. The DIA reported in 1998 that the country's paramilitary organizations, the Territorial Militia Troops, the Youth Labor Army, and the Naval Militia had suffered considerable morale and training degradation over the previous 7 years but still retained the potential to make an enemy invasion costly. Cuba also adopted a war of the people strategy that highlights the defensive nature of its capabilities. On September 14, 2012, a Cuban senior general agreed to further deepen military cooperation with China during a visit to Beijing. He said that Cuba was willing to enhance exchanges with the Chinese military and strengthen bilateral cooperation in personnel training and other areas. Cuban military power was sharply reduced by the loss of Soviet subsidies following the end of the Cold War, and today the Revolutionary Armed Forces numbered 39,000 regular troops. In April 2021, longtime Chief of Staff Álvaro López Miera took over as the Minister of the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces. In 1984, according to Jane's Military Review, there were 3 major geographical commands: Western, Central, and Eastern. There were a reported 130,000 all ranks, and each command was garrisoned by an army comprising a single armored division, a mechanized division, and a corps of 3 infantry divisions. Though the Eastern Command had 2 corps totaling 6 divisions, there was also an independent military region, with a single infantry division, which garrisoned the Isle of Youth. A U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency assessment in the first half of 1998 said that the Army's armor and artillery units were at low readiness levels due to severely reduced training, generally incapable of mounting effective operations above the battalion level, and that equipment was mostly in storage and unavailable at short notice. The same report said that Cuban Special Operations Forces continue to train but on a smaller scale than beforehand, and that while the lack of replacement parts for its existing equipment and the current severe shortage of fuel were increasingly affecting operational capabilities, Cuba remained able to offer considerable resistance to any regional power. The Cuban Revolutionary Air and Air Defense Force, a DAAFAR, was used in the 1980s with the help of the Soviet Union to be able to project power abroad, especially in Africa. During that time, Cuba sent jet fighters and transports for deployment in conflict zones such as Angola and Ethiopia. In 1990, Cuba's Air Force was the best equipped in Latin America. In all, the modern Cuban Air Force imported approximately 230 fixed-wing aircraft. Although there is no exact figure available, Western analysts estimate that at least 130 of these planes are still in service spread out among the 13 military airbases on the island. In 1996, fighters from the DAAFAR shot down T.